A black woman is kneeling beside her car at a gas station, hands cuffed behind her back, gravel biting into her knees, her two children screaming from the back seat. A white officer towers over her, barking orders, one hand hovering near his. Holster. Cars pass by. A few people glance, then quickly look away. She stays silent. Her shoulders rise and fall in slow, measured breaths. She does not plead. She does not shout. He accuses her of loitering, then of trying to steal the car, then of fitting the description. Each time she asks only for a supervisor. He laughs. Nice try, he says. She looks down, says nothing. In the distance, her youngest cries out, "That's my mom." But no one moves. What no one at that gas station knows, not the officer, not the crowd, not even the clerk watching from behind bulletproof glass, is that the woman they just arrested isn't just a mother. In 3 days, she's scheduled to be introduced as the new chief of police for the entire town. And when she walks back into that precinct, she won't be in cuffs. She'll be in charge. Elmwood, Georgia sat quietly between pine woods and cotton fields, the kind of place where people waved from porches but locked their hearts behind shutters. On paper, it was charming. A brick courthouse, a row of antique shops, a police force that smiled for Christmas parades. But the smiles rarely stretched across the railroad tracks where the town's black residents lived. Over there, patrol cars moved slower. Questions came quicker. And second chances were rarely given. She had known this long before arriving. Her name wasn't yet on the door, but her appointment as Elmwood's next chief of police was already signed, sealed, and waiting for announcement. After nearly 20 years working in Atlanta's precincts, rising through the ranks without shortcuts or scandals, she had agreed to lead this small department, not for prestige, but for purpose. She wanted to show her children a life beyond survival, a place where they could breathe, not brace. She wanted to show this town what quiet reform looked like, from the inside out. Only 3 people in Elmwood knew who she was: the mayor, the retiring chief, and the city clerk. The rest would find out during the town's upcoming press conference. Until then, she was just another face in the crowd, a mother with 2 kids and out-of-state plates. Saturday was supposed to be simple, just a trip to the grocery store. Eggs, cereal, a few things for school lunches. The kids had begged for slushies and she gave in, promising they'd stop for gas first. The sun was low in the sky. Early autumn, crisp but warm enough to keep the windows cracked. Her daughter was humming in the back seat. Her son was tracing letters in the fog on the window. She smiled to herself as she pulled into the small gas station off Highway 8, glad to finally feel like a mother again, not just a leader. She parked near the last pump, swiped her card, took the nozzle in hand. Then, a shadow moved behind her. At first, she assumed someone was just walking past, but the footsteps paused, turned, stopped behind her. "You from around here?" the voice asked, not curious. Not kind, heavy, like a verdict. She turned slowly and saw him. White male officer, early 40s, jaw tight, eyes scanning her face like a scanner at checkout. She gave a polite nod, said nothing more. He looked at the license plate, looked back at her. "You nervous for a reason?" Still calm, she explained, "Just getting gas. Kids in the car, grocery run," but he didn't blink. "We've had some break-ins," he said, eyes narrowing. "You match the description." Her daughter looked up, her son's humming stopped. He asked for ID. She handed it over without hesitation. He stared at it longer than necessary. "Step out of the vehicle," he said. She did. He asked if the car was hers. She said yes. He told her to put her hands behind her back. She hesitated, for just a breath. And in that breath, her daughter began to cry. By the time the cuffs clicked, silence had settled. Even the gas pump seemed to hush. No one intervened. A woman clutched her purse and hurried inside. A man at pump 2 turned his back, and as the officer placed her in the cruiser, she caught one last glimpse of her reflection in the glass. Strong, still unshaken. Not long from now, these same streets would know her name, but first they would try to break her. The officer didn't ask. He assumed. Once she was in the back of the cruiser, he radioed something vague about a possible suspect in connection to neighborhood thefts. The dispatcher's voice came back calm, almost uninterested. He didn't explain further. He didn't mention the children still sitting alone in her car, scared and silent, seatbelt still fastened. Her daughter was trembling now, trying to call someone from a pink plastic phone with no service. Her son sat frozen, staring straight. To head as if pretending none of it was real might somehow make it go away. The woman sat in the patrol car with her hands cuffed and her knees together, eyes closed. She said nothing. Her breathing remained even. She knew not to panic, not to speak too much, not to reach for anything. Her silence was not submission, it was survival. Outside, the officer paced like a man proud of a catch. He looked into her. Car once saw the kids and radioed for another unit. Need someone to come get a couple minors, he said flatly. Unattended. He used words like uncooperative and combative, even though she hadn't raised her voice. He didn't mention that she asked for a supervisor. He didn't say that she was dressed plainly, no purse in hand, just her phone and wallet on the front seat. He didn't care. A few bystanders began to gather. One young woman across the lot held up her phone, filming. She said nothing, just stared. A man leaned against his truck, arms crossed, watching with unreadable eyes. Inside the gas station, the clerk peeked out from behind the counter but said nothing. No one stepped forward. No one asked what she had done. Because in Elmwood, Georgia, black explanations are often quieter than white suspicions. The second unit arrived. Another officer stepped out, a younger one, less hardened. He glanced at the kids first, then at the cuffs, then back at the arresting officer. "You get a name?" he asked. The first officer waved him off. "Says she's visiting. No ID on." Her kept getting defensive. That was a lie. She had handed over her license. Her badge wasn't with her. She had locked it away during the weekend, but her full name and information were there, clear as day. The younger officer hesitated. He looked into the cruiser at her. She didn't meet his gaze. She was still centered. "What do you want to do with the kids?" he asked. "Call child services if no one claims them," the first officer said. That made her look up. Just for a second. No words. Just a slow, deliberate breath. The arresting officer opened the cruiser door. "You got someone who can take your kids?" She nodded once. "Call the mayor," she said quietly. He laughed loud and sharp. "Sure. You got his number too?" She didn't respond. "Let's see what the system says about you," he muttered, slamming the door. Inside the cruiser, the air was stale. The plexiglass reflected her face back at her. Calm, proud, utterly misplaced. This was not her first encounter with power misused, but it was perhaps the most personal. She was not just protecting herself. She was protecting the image her children carried of her. The younger officer gently led the children into his own patrol car, placing them in the back with water bottles and soft words. He didn't look at the woman again. He didn't need to. On the radio, the dispatcher asked if they had confirmed identity yet. The arresting officer said he was working on it. But he wasn't. He stood outside, arms crossed, surveying the scene like a trophy he didn't understand. And all around them, the town kept moving. A car honked at the light. Someone bought scratch tickets inside. A woman fed her dog in the back of her van. No alarms, no urgency. Just a black mother in cuffs and a white officer feeling certain he had done something right. But the clock was ticking, and Elmwood's newest police chief was about to change everything he thought he knew. The holding room was small, cold metal bench, fluorescent light flickering overhead. She sat still, hands in her lap now that the cuffs had been removed but not forgotten. The thin paper of the processing clipboard rested on a desk beside her, untouched. No charges had been formally filed, no Miranda rights read. But she'd been brought in like a suspect, cataloged like an object, separated from her children like a stranger. Outside the glass, the officer who brought her in laughed with another patrolman. They leaned against the wall, sipping coffee from vending machine cups, talking about football and good instincts. He recounted how he caught her trying to play smart, how she kept asking for a supervisor like that had changed something. She really thought name-dropping the mayor would scare me, he said, chuckling. The other officer raised an eyebrow. What's her name? Didn't even check. She gave me a Georgia license, but the address was new. You know how they move around. He said it like she was a type, not a person. She sat inside the room, hearing every word. Still silent. On a table beside her, her purse and phone lay sealed in a clear evidence bag. Her ID was face up. Bold letters. Full name. Everything they needed to know. She had told them. They hadn't listened. In a side room, her children sat together on a couch, knees touching. The younger one clutched her stuffed toy, long since worn around the ears. A civilian officer had offered them crackers and juice, but they hadn't touched them. They didn't. Speak. They stared at the door, waiting for her to come back through. The captain on duty, a man named Ford who had only been acting chief for a week, got the call around noon. It came from the mayor's office, firm, fast, and confused. She in custody? The voice asked. Who? He replied. They gave him her name. Captain Ford froze. That can't be right. The mayor didn't repeat himself. Moments later, Ford burst through the precinct doors. He didn't wait for pleasantries or explanations. He moved straight to processing, straight to the woman sitting in silence, framed by shadows and fluorescent light. He saw her, saw the ID, saw the clipboard with no charges, no crime, just assumptions. Her expression didn't change when he entered. She didn't stand. She didn't speak, but he did. Get her belongings, he barked. The arresting officer stepped forward, confused. Wait, what's going? She's not a suspect. She's your superior, Ford said. The silence that followed cracked something. In the room. The other patrolman backed away. The younger officer from earlier looked down at his shoes. The civilian clerk stood frozen with the juice tray still in her hands. The arresting officer's jaw moved, but no words came. She is the new chief of police, Ford said quietly now. And you arrested her in front of her children. No one breathed. Ford turned to her. I'm deeply sorry, he said. Still, she said nothing. She simply stood, collected her bag, and walked past the stunned officers toward the side room where her children waited. The door creaked open. Two little faces lit up. She knelt, opened her arms, and wrapped them around their small shoulders without a sound. No yelling, no rage, just the quiet heartbreak of a woman wronged in front of those who mattered most. And though she had been freed, something in the air had changed, not just in that room, but across the whole department. They had touched the wrong woman, and now they would answer for it. 3 days later, the sun rose over Elmwood with a rare stillness. The town square had been freshly swept. Folding chairs lined up in neat rows outside City Hall. A small podium waited beneath a banner that read, "Welcome our new police chief." Local press was in place, cameras mounted, microphones clipped, officers in full dress uniforms stood. At attention, shifting in the morning heat. And in the back row, standing uncomfortably in a wrinkled uniform and scuffed boots, was the same officer who had made the arrest. He hadn't been invited to stand with the others. He hadn't been asked to escort the new chief. He was told to attend, observe, and listen. Around him, townspeople had gathered. Some curious, some skeptical, a few holding small paper programs with her name printed in bold. Danielle R. Hayes, Chief of Police. He scanned the crowd, now hyper-aware of who was watching him. One woman narrowed her eyes when she recognized him. A man shook his head. He heard his own name whispered more than once, but no one said it aloud. No one had to. At exactly 10 a.m., the mayor stepped up to the podium. He spoke carefully, his voice practiced but solemn. He thanked the previous chief, praised the town. Then he cleared his throat and announced what everyone was waiting for. Elmwood is ready for a new chapter, he said, and I am honored to introduce the woman who will lead it. She stepped forward without fanfare, no flashing lights, no music, just quiet footsteps and straight shoulders. The same woman the officer had pinned against a cruiser was now wearing the badge he once claimed gave him authority. Her uniform was pressed, her posture unbroken, and as she passed him in the crowd, she did not flinch. She did not look down. She met his eyes for just 1 second and moved on. The crowd applauded. Some stood, some wiped their eyes. A few whispered, "That's her?" As realization rippled through the square, she took the podium and looked out at them all. "My name is Danielle Hayes," she began. "I am a mother, I am a daughter, I am a police officer, and today, I am your new chief." Her voice was clear, even, strong without shouting. "I did not come here to punish, I came here to build, to restore trust, to ensure dignity is not a privilege, it's a promise." She did not mention what happened. She didn't need to. Everyone who mattered already knew. The officer who had arrested her kept his eyes on the ground. Sweat beaded under his collar. For the first time, he saw what others saw when they looked at her. Calm power, earned authority, and a dignity he could never take from her. She finished her speech, shook hands, and walked off stage. No celebration. No fireworks. Just quiet respect. And from that day forward, her name meant something different in Elmwood. Not just chief, but symbol. She had changed the room, without raising her voice. The footage didn't stay in Elmwood. By Sunday morning, the video taken at the gas station had been posted online. By Monday, it had been shared across state lines. And by Tuesday, after the press conference confirmed her identity, it had been featured on national news, not just for the arrest, but for how she responded. The woman in the video didn't yell. She didn't resist, she didn't plead. She waited and then she led. The headline read, "New police chief arrested by own department before being sworn in." Within days, phone calls flooded City Hall. Civil rights organizations reached out. Journalists requested interviews she declined. She wasn't chasing attention. She was rebuilding something older and quieter than a single moment of injustice. Trust. Behind the scenes, change began. The mayor, now under pressure, called for a full review of the police department's conduct. Every body cam from that day was pulled. Every report scrutinized. The officer who arrested her was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. His past stops and citations were reviewed, and a pattern emerged. Disproportionate stops of black residents. A pattern no one had questioned until now. Danielle Hayes didn't demand his firing. She asked for something harder: transparency, accountability, education. She instituted a mandatory training program called Dignity in Duty. It wasn't outsourced. She taught it herself. Officers had to attend in small groups, face-to-face, not just to check a box, but to have a conversation they could no longer avoid. The arresting officer sat in the second row of the first session. Eyes down, shoulders stiff, he didn't speak, but he stayed. And when she explained what it feels like to be unseen, unheard, presumed guilty before a single question is asked, he didn't argue. He listened. For the first time in his career, perhaps, he listened. Some officers resisted at first, whispered about her behind closed doors, said she was making it personal. But over time, even they couldn't deny what was happening. The department changed. Use of force complaints dropped. Community calls were returned faster. People who once avoided the precinct began showing up. Black mothers reporting concerns, elders offering ideas, even teenagers asking about internships. She didn't host rallies. She hosted listening circles. She didn't stage protests. She staged accountability meetings, where officers heard directly from residents they once dismissed. She did it all with calm, and the shift wasn't just within the walls of the department. It moved outward. Churches held panels on racial bias in law enforcement. Schools invited her to speak about justice and leadership. The local paper ran a month-long series on community trust and policing, featuring anonymous voices from both sides of the badge. She never spoke about the day she was arrested, but those who were there remembered. The officer who had led her away, in cuffs, began arriving early, staying late, volunteering for foot patrols instead of car assignments. One day, without prompt, he visited the school where her daughter attended, asked to sit in the back during a community Q&A. He didn't speak, just watched her field questions from fourth graders about fairness, fear, and how to be brave when people don't see your worth. Afterward, he nodded once. Not to her, to himself. For the first time, he understood that authority is not the loudest voice in the room. It's the one that makes everyone else feel safe enough to speak. The reckoning was not swift. It was steady. And in that steadiness, Elmwood began to change. Not with a bang, but with a breath. By spring, Elmwood had changed in ways no one would have predicted just months before. At first, the changes were small. A notice in the town paper announcing the formation of a community police advisory board. A new tip line managed by civilian volunteers, not sworn officers. Patrol routes that began including neighborhoods long ignored. But beneath the surface, something deeper was shifting. People began to look one another in the eye again. Black residents, who for years had avoided calling the police for fear of being blamed, started showing up to precinct meetings. They asked hard questions. And for the first time, those questions were met not with defensiveness, but with answers. Real ones. Danielle Hayes never made speeches. She made space. She stopped by schools unannounced, not to lecture but to listen. She walked into barber shops without cameras, just to ask how people were doing. She stood in the back of church basements during community events and always left before the applause. Her presence didn't shrink rooms. It steadied them. One afternoon, in April, a young black boy walked into the precinct holding his sister's hand. She had been harassed walking home from school. He didn't yell. He didn't accuse. He simply asked, "Can someone help us?" And someone did. It wasn't a miracle. It was policy. Danielle had created a victim advocacy desk, staffed by trained civilians, funded by reallocated department funds. It offered counseling, resources, and follow-ups, especially for families like his. Word spread. Something else changed too. Inside the department, officers began holding one another accountable. A veteran patrolman who used to joke about code words on the radio was corrected, gently, firmly, by a younger colleague who now understood what those words truly cost. Another officer, once dismissive of complaints, began logging every stop with written explanations and offered them willingly during reviews. They weren't perfect, but they were improving. And perhaps the clearest sign of change came from the officer who had once arrested her. After completing the training she led, after sitting in 2 community forums and facing questions with lowered eyes, he requested transfer to desk duty, not out of shame, out of reflection. He said he wanted to learn, to watch, to understand what he had missed for so long. He never apologized publicly. She never demanded it. But one afternoon, as she left the precinct, he held the door open. She nodded. He nodded back. Nothing more. That quiet exchange rippled further than any press conference ever could. The mayor began pushing for broader reforms, expanding civilian oversight, reallocating funds toward youth mentorship programs, auditing past complaints that had long been buried. Danielle didn't lead with a heavy hand. She led with an open one, and people followed. In 1 year, complaints against officers dropped by over 40%. Community event attendance tripled. Department turnover slowed. And for the first time in decades, Elmwood's public trust rating rose across every demographic line. Not everyone liked her. Some still grumbled behind closed doors, said she was changing too much, too fast. But even they couldn't deny the calm that had settled over the town. The kind of calm that comes when fear starts to loosen its grip. Justice in Elmwood was no longer just a word. It was a rhythm, a practice, a habit. Danielle Hayes did not lecture people into change. She showed them, and they, in turn, began to show one another. The sirens don't scare her children anymore. When they hear them now, they don't flinch or duck or ask, "Is someone in trouble?" Instead, they glance at the clock and say, "Mom must be on her way somewhere." On weekends, they ride with her in parades, sit beside her at community cookouts, watch her shake hands with people who once whispered, now waving openly. They don't know every detail of what happened that day at the gas station, but they know this: their mother walks taller now, and so do they. She doesn't tell the story often. When asked about it, She simply says, "That was the day they saw me. But I had already arrived." Because for Danielle Hayes, justice was never about revenge. It was about recognition, a seat at the table, and the grace to sit in it without demanding others stand aside. Her leadership didn't come with noise. It came with presence. Years from now, people in Elmwood might forget the headlines, but they won't forget the feeling of the town changing. Slowly, steadily, under the watch of a woman who refused to break when they bent her low. She made dignity a standard and left no room for silence where justice was owed. If stories like this matter to you, help amplify them. Share this video so more people understand the power of quiet justice.